so happy to have you here today and to be able to know your story even more, and for everyone hearing or watching to get to learn from you and everything that you have been able to figure out on this health
Yeah,
journey.
for sure. Yeah, I am so appreciative of you having me. I'm really excited to dive into everything. And just like you said, I hope that there are some listeners that can really relate to my story and get some help from it.
Sure, for sure. So let's start a little bit with how was it for you growing up, childhood and teenage years? How do you relate it to your health, to your body, maybe like food related stuff,
Yeah.
exercise? How was it that for you growing up?
Yeah. So that was honestly a big part of my story and what led me to where I am now. I didn't grow up with the worst lifestyle, but I would say that my parents were relatively health conscious, kind of relatively speaking to others that weren't so much. But we still had the McDonald's, we had the Wendy's, like we were kind of in the middle, I guess you could say. And there were little ebbs and flows where my mom, I remember, would just randomly get really into like everything's going to be organic, and instead of brownies, I'm going to give you a granola bar for a snack to take to school. Like little changes like that I do think kind of sparked some of my interest, because it is interesting, like going especially in a school setting. I ended up being homeschooled from 5th grade through high school, but up until 5th grade, you're in elementary school and about to come into middle school. And it was crazy to me just thinking back how when my mom did go through those phases and we had like apples and granola bars and things like that for a snack, and everyone sitting around me, had junk food, how I was the one that was so not normal, and everyone else was looking at it like, oh my gosh, like your mom is this like hippie, healthy person or whatever. And just looking back now, it's so strange that like me literally eating an apple instead of a piece of candy, or like having, I don't even know, I can't think about specific examples, but I do remember, the kids that ate either the school that was provided or the food that was provided at school, or um whatever snacks their parents packed them. Like I can even remember just this random um day where someone, I'm not even kidding, had a container of icing with a spoon, and like that's what her mom, I guess, let her bring as a snack, and all of us were so jealous. And so like, oh, our moms would never let us do that, you're so cool. And obviously now looking back, we're like, oh my goodness, like what is going on? So growing up, like I said, it was kind of back and forth, but it is crazy how, even from an early age, we're kind of taught that it's abnormal to be healthy in a way. Like it's just so common to not fuel your body with things that are actually helpful to your energy and, focus and everything that you need in school. So moving into teenage years, or even a little bit before teenage years, I definitely started having a lot of digestive issues. I can remember being in school, so it must have been 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, because it was before I was homeschooled, sitting at my desk with my knees like up to my chest, because I would get stomach cramps from just poor digestion and whatever I was dealing with my gut. Obviously later found out, how to eat that, was conducive to my gut health, but I definitely started pretty early on to struggle with some different things. And moving into teenage years, the onset of puberty and everything like that, of course, that's what really brought a lot of the issues that led me into the field of hormone health. I started getting really horrible acne. Um, my mom struggled with acne growing up, and my dad struggled with a lot of issues like rosacea and eczema and the more inflammatory conditions. And so I feel like I kind of got the best of both worlds from both parents, and my skin was just like, I looked like I was sunburned all the time. It was so red and inflamed. So that was one of the biggest things that I started to notice that, was a symptom coming up. And then as my period came and my cycle came, just struggled so much with, the typical pain that comes. And of course, you're taught to believe that it's just something that comes with it. It's something that you have to get over. I can remember, friendships and relationships being affected by the PMS that I was dealing with. And I'd kind of write it off as like, oh, well, I'm about to start my period. I'm just PMSing, and just kind of use that as an excuse to be, in just horrible communication with people, and just the emotional changes that happened, and not even feeling like myself. It was a really hard thing. But again, we're taught that it's just something that comes with it, and everyone else deals with it. You talk to your friends about it as a teenager and they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, it's the worst. Like, you'd be the oddball if you're like, oh, I don't struggle with any of that, or maybe you'd be looked at as lucky. And so things kind of started to shift as I honestly got more into my health. I got really, probably because of, I think my skin is what prompted me to start doing research. I went to a dermatologist to begin with, and they gave me all kinds of prescriptions that might have calmed down the acne, but would just make the inflammation worse because my skin was so irritated from everything. And so I can remember doing some research about how to solve acne, and watching some videos or reading some things about girls who were maybe talking about not eating dairy or something like that. And, more food related, that sparked my interest. And so I went down that road, kind of mildly to begin with, like just watching things like dairy and gluten and seeing how it affected me. And it's crazy because I can remember maybe being, I don't know, 12 or 13, going to the dermatologist, my skin being noticeably better, and him saying, oh my goodness, your skin looks good. Have you been keeping up with your regimen? And I said, actually, I've been experimenting with my diet a little bit, and it's made a big difference. I haven't even been using the prescription. And he goes, oh, that doesn't make that much of an impact. Like, it's probably something else, and just straight up completely shut it down. And so that was kind of my first glimpse into, oh, this is different. This is not something that is supported on both ends. Like, I know what changed my skin. I know it was the only thing I changed was the way that I was eating. And this medical professional is looking at me like, what? No, that's not what it is, just completely writing it off. So, pretty early on, I started to see that disconnect of not everyone's on the same page. And it was a little confusing, but also intriguing, because it kind of just pushed me into doing my own research even more, realizing that I didn't have the support I expected from medical professionals pretty early on. So when I dove into health and trying to figure out how to, heal my body, I dove head first. I'm the kind of person that is like all in or all out, or I used to be. I'm working on it. And when I was, a young teenager, I was going all in on all the different diets. And I mean, I went straight, like, I was vegan for 7 years and raw vegan for 4 of those 7 years, or maybe 3. I'd go on and off like during the summers sometimes. And not that that's a negative thing. It works for a lot of different people, but I later on realized everyone's body is different. There is no one size fits all. And, I was so young that watching all these videos and reading all these articles about how, this one diet is just a miracle for everyone, I got really sucked into it. And so I actually ended up losing a lot of weight. I didn't really have a lot of weight to lose, but I was, not purposefully under eating, but definitely not getting as much, fat and protein as I probably could have been. And I was exercising like crazy, like going on 3-mile runs every morning and then getting back and doing some weighted workouts. And so that quickly changed the symptoms that I was experiencing, from having, painful periods, bad PMS, really bad acne, to the acne still being there, but my period just went MIA. I didn't have a period for, I think, over a year at one point when I was a teenager. And so I went to the gynecologist, and this was kind of my second run in with, oh, there's a disconnect here, because I walk in, I explain my situation. The first thing they asked me is, do you have an eating disorder? And I said, wow, that's first of all, very just straightforward to ask a 13, 14-year-old, but no, I don't. I'm very healthy. I'm very conscious about what I'm eating, but I don't have an eating disorder. And, this lady's telling me like, oh, well, you're pretty thin. You look pretty athletic for your age. So I wasn't sure if there's anything like that going on. And Obviously, looking back, I know that I could have toned it down a little bit, but there definitely wasn't any kind of disorder going on. And so I just very quickly was like, oh no, that's not what's going on at all. And of course, the second thing is, could you be pregnant? And I'm like, lady, I'm homeschooled. I don't even have any like interaction with boys. Like, I haven't even kissed a boy yet. And also, it's been a year since I've missed my period. So I think that I would have realized if I was pregnant by now. And so those are the only two questions. And then it goes, okay, well, here's some different options for birth control. No real explanation of why. And so I kind of was like, oh, okay, what makes you say birth control? And like, oh, well, it'll, help your period come back. It'll help keep things regular. And because I had done enough research and was just passionate enough about healing my body, even at 14 years old, I was like, but why is it gone? What caused it in the first place? And there really wasn't any kind of explanation. It was very just like circular conversation that just always came back to, here's the different options and here's the side effects of each one. We can figure out which one's better for you. And I just consistently kept saying, but why is it happening? Like, how do I fix it? And so I actually ended up leaving without the birth control. I talked to my mom. I couldn't even drive at the time. So I remember talking to her on the way home, and she was pretty supportive either way. So she was just kind of like, yeah, I mean, if we need to figure this out, and you want to do it without the birth control, what would that look like? Like, what are your ideas? And I was kind of talking about, well, I'm pretty interested in figuring things out holistically. I started to dive into that pretty early on. So there has to be a better answer. Like, there has to be something better than here's a band-aid basically for it. My first thought was, it was frustrating because I did see myself as being pretty healthy at the time, that my body was seeming to be working against me, even though I was doing what I thought was quote unquote everything right. So that sparked some interest too, in the sense of, okay, well, what does healthy really mean? Like, maybe what I'm doing is healthy for other people, but my body is obviously not responding well to it. So that kind of shifted my perspective and allowed me to explore other avenues of different dietary theories and different basically angles of health. And that's what led me to IIN. So when I ended up graduating at 16 and starting my freshman year of college then. So I was doing college locally. And then on top of that, I was looking at IIN, the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, for a background in integrative health. So I think when I was maybe 17 or 18, I actually started that program. And that is truly what opened my eyes to, I mean, we learned over 100 different dietary theories and different experts coming on, whether it's, health related, mindset related, spirituality related. There were so many different angles. I really recommend the program for anyone who's, interested and intrigued by this kind of thing, because it really opened up my eyes to not just figure out my own body, but help others to figure out what's going on with them as well. So pretty early on, I started to go down that path. And I very quickly, I think within just a few months of experimenting, my period came back, my symptoms started to subside. There was definitely a little bit of a roller coaster there of kind of figuring things out, going through trial and error, and maybe one thing worked, one thing didn't, and then I would continue forward. And eventually, really, really was able, after a few years, to nail down what my body needed in order to thrive, and had a regular cycle, no symptoms, other than, knowing exactly what would be causing a symptom if I get a little breakout here and there. Because I believe, I'll always have acne prone skin. We can look at my genetics and see that, but I can be more in control and in charge of knowing why that's happening. Like, maybe I didn't get enough sleep, I'm stressed, I'm not eating properly, versus, oh, I'm just about to start my period and I'm going to break out every single time, regardless of what I do. So really starting to shift a lot of different perspectives. And that kind of led me to getting started with the business side of things, which I don't know if you want me to transition to that yet, because I know you were wanting me to do the life story. Okay, so basically the way that worked is I graduated from the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, and to rewind things a little bit, of course, this whole time I'm talking to family and friends, and oh my gosh, did you guys know that it's not normal to have these symptoms? Like, if you actually take care of yourself, a lot of these things can be solved. And feeling so grateful that I didn't go down the route of birth control, because I don't, it would have delayed me figuring things out for sure. And so really advocating without having even started with working with people yet, because it was just blowing my mind that that knowledge that I had to dig to find was not just readily available to everyone. So went through the nutrition program and the integrative health program, came out on the other side with even more of a passion than I had before, and obviously more knowledge than I had before. And then just took that and kind of went into the direction of hormone health, because when I started out, I started coaching locally, just doing general wellness coaching, helping women figure out, whatever symptom they came to me with, not realizing it was hormone related. I would find fairly quickly that there was almost always a tie back to their hormones. And because that was my experience, it was easier for me to see those connections. So it almost started to become case studies. I like to, look at it, because I'd only experienced my own healing process. So it was interesting when I started working with others and getting an example of, okay, this is how your body works, and then this is how your body works, and seeing the differences and the similarities with everyone, and started to kind of develop some idea of, okay, what are the core principles that I think everyone needs to know and deserves to know to figure out their hormone health and their health in general. And then what are those pieces that are very individual to each and every person, and starting to kind of create a blueprint based on that, and very quickly shifted to hormone health specifically and kind of ran with that. So again, just doing in-person, little classes and one-on-one sessions. And then very conveniently, the year before COVID hit was when I transitioned online. And I think that because of what happened, at the beginning of 2020, it's what kind of made me realize, like, being online is more beneficial right now. So that's what I want to do. I can reach more people. I can talk to more people. I'm not a social media person, or I didn't used to be. So it was kind of a hard shift for me to be okay with working completely online, because I do love that, personal connection with other people. But it was crazy once I did step into the online space and started sharing, what I knew and what I had learned, and what I was realizing about, how our cycle works and how it's connected to so many different areas of our health, and saw a crazy response to it of, like, I didn't even know that I could feel better. I didn't even know that I could not have cramps, not have acne, not have PMS, whatever it is. And that's where I ended up getting some mentorship, some business mentorship from someone that I found that had a program for online coaches. And they really helped me take what, was up here in my mind of, what I knew and what I had experienced and the case studies from other people, and condense it into a program with those step-by-step pieces. And that's kind of what leads me to where I am today, where, for the last few years, I've been working with others on their hormone health and allowing them to see how much it's connected to other areas of their health. And it, anywhere from cramps to I've been trying to get pregnant for 2 years and nothing seems to work. It's a spectrum of different issues that I see, but it's all very much tied to a similar root cause. And the biggest message is just that it can be better, that it's possible to feel like the best version of yourself, and in a way that's sustainable. It doesn't have to be a chore to take care of yourself. So yeah, I'd say that's kind of the summary of how things started and what led me to where I am today.
I love this. Recapping a little bit on what you said, that last part, how it has to be sustainable for it to work. And honestly, I think that throughout everything that you have told me, I'm just blown away, because I know how many people that have lived what you live
Right.
were not able to say no to the birth control. And my
Right.
experience, I just like, I didn't knew, I didn't have this curiosity. I don't know, it was maybe part of my journey for some reason,
Mhm.
but I'm still blown away with the fact that you were 13, 14 years old, and you were able to hear your listen in a way
Yeah.
that you knew that wasn't the road. That's not the way, that's not where I'm heading. And it's very hard to be dismissed by people that we have in a place of power
Yep.
on health related stuff, and realizing that it's not they're not going to offer much more alternatives that the ones that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because it's it's like having your period, your cycle. It's an effect of like a bunch of things being in perfect synchronicity and harmony. And if certain foundational things are not in place, makes sense that your cycle is crazy and all over the place.
Yeah.
But it's like society, it's trained and in some way has programmed us to believe that having painful periods or having like to take a birth control because of XYZ symptom to manage it. And then it's what you said, we have this cultural part where it's like it's normal and it's makes you feel fit in. Like, okay, so all of my friends in school are with PMS, are having this and this and this, and then being okay, being healthy,
Yeah.
it's not normal. Eating apples and eating real food as in your
Yeah.
childhood
Yeah.
wasn't normal. And it's a little bit like what you do and what you live was like, no, we have been looking at something that's common as normal, but that's not what it is. Our bodies have this capability of, from being able to create life, to be able to have a cycle where you can fully enjoy life also,
Yeah.
and it not to be a curse.
Yeah.
And I love it that you were able to not only learn very deeply and gather all this information from studying from case studies, also from different people, and then putting all of this together and being able to live from what you love. Little curious, what happened with college? Like, what happened with that? What were you studying? Did you ever thought you were going to end up being a hormonal coach? Do you thought you were going to be working online, as you said? And how good was it for you that it could, like, perfect timing in some way with pandemics and everything?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm trying to think of what year. I think I graduated in maybe like 2017 or 18. Ended up just good old science major, nothing too specific. And I actually, it's funny that you asked that because I, number one, never, of course, would have imagined that I would be a hormone health coach. I still every day that someone asks me what I do for a living have to kind of explain what that is. And it doesn't matter. It could be a man, woman, whoever just has such an interest of like, what, it's almost like they know, like, oh wait, that it makes sense that that would be needed, but like, how does that work? What, especially, oh my gosh, I always joke with my husband that the first thing, if it's a man that I'm talking to, they'll be like, oh, you need to talk to my wife, like that's the first thought, is like, I know what you're talking about with them hormones or whatever. So people have an awareness of it, but of course that's not a normal career to have. And so I never could have imagined myself even doing any kind of coaching. But I, coming into college, I would say like early high school, I thought that I was going to be a meteorologist, actually, which is very interesting and completely nowhere near what things could look like now. And so I remember I went to like a local news channel and shadowed the weather people and like looked at the radars. I was very intrigued with like storms and tornadoes and stuff like that. So I can remember in high school shadowing at a meteorologist lab kind of thing where they had all these monitors like looking at different storm cells. And I don't know how old I was, maybe 15 or so. I remember asking the lead meteorologist, I said, so do you ever like go outside and like chase the storms? And he was like, what do you mean? And I was like, do you ever like go see tornadoes? And he was like, no, we just do it from the screen. And I was like, well, what about those like shows like Storm Chasers where they go after the tornadoes? That's what I'm trying to do. And they were like, yeah, that's not really a thing. And so I was like, well, meteorology's done. That's not what I want to do. And for a while I was interested in like archaeology. So definitely always in like the science side of things, just like understanding how things work. And I think that that's what gives me that side of fulfillment with all of this, because it's very much about understanding the body and the hormone fluctuations and the way that the brain interacts with the body. And it's such an interesting and crazy phenomenon that happens every single day, every minute of every day, that we're just not even aware of most of the time. We're just living our life not realizing all the little neurons firing and hormones and brain parts communicating. Like there's so much going on just within our body as a whole, but the cycle specifically is so interesting. But yeah, that's such a good question, because of course I never would have thought to be here, but now that I can look back on what I was interested in, there's definitely elements that come into play. Even in my program inside of the modules, I always joke with my clients, I'll be like, all right, module 3, the beginning is a biology lesson. So like for all of the, science nerds, you'll appreciate the first part, because I like to find a balance of, the inner work and the mindset work, but also like, here's how the body is actually working, and in a much deeper way than just kind of surface level what we're taught. And I love that you said something too about, this being something that can be very life-giving. The whole point of our cycle is for that purpose too. So being able to see how much it can affect your life and, allow you to live your life even more fully and more deeply it's fundamental to what this is. And unfortunately, a lot of us think of just our period when we think of our cycle. If you ask someone, like, what do you know about the menstrual cycle? It's like, oh, well, like my period and blah, blah, blah. That's kind of the first thought. But there's so much more to it. And it's just so interesting. But yeah, I'm very grateful to have shifted gears and do something like this, because it's not super common, but it definitely checks all of the boxes of, what I enjoy doing and brings even more passion to it.
That's so good and so inspiring for everyone hearing us that, wants to break the mold and live the life that truly sparks up and truly, leaves a mark beyond, it's possible to do that. Looking at everything, how you started building your program,
Yeah.
and well, time has passed by and I've been able to kind of like literally see how you have built this, and I think it's beautiful to just like see how we can truly live from what we enjoy, and live from serving and helping others, which is
Yeah.
like not what we're normally told, as we are not normally told, like, be curious about your body, ask why, instead of putting a band-aid to the symptoms. That's that's something that I think that you see it a lot with the people that comes to you,
Mm-hmm.
how they see fertility issues and they have trying to put band-aids all over.
Yeah.
In my personal journey, they put band-aids on my hormonal issues for years, and they were actually like gut related issues, and how it's
Yeah.
all related stuff.
Yeah.
And it's not like when you go to school or when when you grow up and you started to get some education on these topics, they tell you, this influences your lifestyle in ways that will change and influence how you want to eat, how you sleep, how you move.
Yep.
Like, they don't tell you any of that, and it's like, either you get pregnant or you're bleeding, and that's
Yep.
it. And so yeah, how is it for you to be able to to discover this. Okay, because you told me like, yeah, I got into health and I started into all of this because of just like food changes that, acne, my personal journey. But
Yeah.
how did you discover that you could actually like sync your life with your cycle? Because I know this is like a whole nother level,
Yeah.
especially like when it comes to, I think when it comes to living a life where you have like that option, because you
Yeah.
have the ability to adapt, some work differently than if you had a, regular 9 to 5 job and that stuff like that. So
Yeah.
also like, how do you take that to life, and all of like, how did you discover it, all of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because that is one of the most interesting, I would say, second to people just discovering that they don't have to feel that way around their period. It can be better. It can be a beautiful thing that doesn't come with, tons and tons of symptoms. I would say, second most intriguing thing is that idea of not just how your cycle works, but how you actually can apply it to your life and just use it as like a blueprint on how to live your life, whether it's the way that you eat, the way that you move your body, the way that you are, socializing, the way that you're working. There's all of these different things that pertain or can pertain to the hormone fluctuations that come with a cycle. And the unfortunate truth is that in our world today, everything is set up in a very, I would say, masculine way. It's very structured. It's very same thing every day. You go to work 9 to 5, you do the same things. Even when we look at different exercise programs, they don't have, they might have one for men and women, but it's really not any different in the idea of how your energy levels change throughout your cycle. So there's all these little pieces that, honestly, when I started doing research, and just figuring things out, the simple idea of how our energy levels fluctuate. They are at the lowest around the time of our period. They are at the highest typically around the time of ovulation, about the midpoint of our cycle. And then they dip back down again as you approach menstruation. And taking that with the same idea that I had discovered because of my, relationship with exercise, where there were times that I would under exercise, there were times when I would way over exercise, and I would realize through my, my own experience and also through research how that was affecting my cortisol levels. I was stressing my body out, and it was almost, counterproductive with what I thought I was doing that was a good thing, ended up turning into something that was just causing me to be in this fight or flight state. And so seeing how those cortisol levels came up when we were working against our body, we were, overdoing it versus following what our body, kind of has that natural threshold for energy wise. And then looking at the cycle and saying, okay, so energy is lowest around our period, highest around ovulation, but we're moving our body the same way every day. We're expending around the same amount of energy. If you're following, what kind of most people do, you're not, unless you're kind of unconsciously doing it because you just notice that you're more tired around your period and you're like, oh, I don't feel like going to the gym. But there's not usually this very intentional, my energy is lower here and my energy is higher here, and I'm going to move my body accordingly, or I'm going to socialize accordingly, or whatever it is, that energetic capacity is higher and lower depending on where you are in the month. And it's very easy to figure out, tracking your period and tracking your cycle. And then what's so cool to me is when I work with, others who aren't aware of this so much, and then they start to live more according to their cycle, and they quickly realize, oh, like I do feel this way around this time, or I do feel that way around this time. I just wasn't paying attention to it. But now that I'm aware of it, like I totally, have the low here and the high here. I might go into more of like a nesting mode, like energy turning more inward in this stage versus being very outward, wanting to go out, have fun, hang out with friends during this stage. But like I said, there was never that, intentional connection to it. So, and there's some information out there, like I can't remember specific like names of books and articles and things like that, but the term cycle syncing was there, or just kind of that whole idea of, timing things alongside your cycle was there in a sense when I was, doing research years ago. And so kind of took that little bit of confirmation of like, oh, these people realize that too, there's something to this. And used that with my own body, especially with movement because of my relationship with exercise being very intense, being able to rein it in and slow down when I needed to slow down, speed up when I need to speed up, and not conform to kind of the day to day looking the same every single day. And even if you do like work a 9 to 5 and have to show up in the same way every day at work, and I have a lot of clients who that is the case. Like they have a regular 9 to 5 job, they can't control what they do every day, but you take what you are in charge of in the morning before work, in the evening after work, on the weekends, and decide how you're going to take care of your body accordingly, based on where you are. So it doesn't have to depend on what your life looks like. You can really attribute it to any kind of lifestyle. But yeah, it's just the awareness. And that's one of the biggest, not just for other people, but for myself, one of those like mind blown moments of, oh my gosh, like we have this wiring that no one really pays attention to. And it can change so much. I mean, if you think about those energy fluctuations too, just like you mentioned, it can apply to your work life as well. Getting on more social events or those kind of like outward expressions of your business or your work or whatever it is that you're doing around those higher energy weeks as you get closer to the midpoint of your cycle, and then ride that wave as things start to decrease and you can kind of do some back end, admin work and content creation and kind of the more like inward quiet, slower tasks that you have to do. There's just so many things that you can do to kind of honor that natural ebb and flow that happens. And then once you've done it for a couple of months, it's like, why would I not do this? It just makes so much sense. And like I said, I think the coolest thing, or one of the coolest things with my own clients, is just seeing them, have those aha moments of like, oh, it makes sense that I felt this way. And now I actually know what to do with it. Because before there was just I am more tired, but it was kind of like, why am I tired? Why am I emotional? It brought more disconnect. Whereas the awareness of it allows you to connect with your body even more deeply because you're like, I know what's going on. I know why it's happening and I know how to support my body through it. And that's kind of the biggest thing with, living your life according to your cycle, is it just brings so much connection and deeper relationship to your own body.
Yes, totally. And I think it's crazy how we are not, none of these things are offered or teach or, expose as much as we see all of the other alternatives and all of the other information.
Yeah.
And how it's so normal to have all of these things. Instead, we're not talking more about this. We aren't. And I think it's, from everything you say, it's just recalling, it's so powerful when we are able to flow with our cycle, like to flow with what's natural to us instead of going against our own nature. But it's hard if we are not educated, if we don't have the understanding that we are going against what's natural to us. And also something you mentioned, I think it's super important that we understand that it's not black or white, because with what you said, I have some clients that have to work out what they have under their control. Mm-hmm. And do the best with what they can, with what they have. And I think it's so true, not only with, hormonal stuff, but in the healing journey. Like we sometimes have to work out with what we have available and just not think that we are helpless because we cannot control all the, stuff that's going on. And also, I think that's very different when you get to relate to the world, having compassion and understanding with why you're feeling some way. Maybe you have to go to your job or you have to do XYZ responsibility that you cannot move, and you understand that you're in XYZ phase of your cycle, that you are more going inward with your energy, but you can show up to yourself and do what you have to do. Because in some way I have seen on social media like people, talking much more about these topics, which I love, but in some way not like, it's like, yeah, it's my period time and I'm just saying no to all social plans. Like it's not something that if you are living with this philosophy and then you're limiting out, the experiences that you get to live.
Mm-hmm.
We have to learn how to balance that. And other things, like, to mention before that, it's like, it's crazy how we live like such a counterproductive, lifestyle to our health.
Yeah.
When you were just like talking about all of this, I was thinking about how, when I was in high school, I used to play soccer, which
Mm-hmm.
is like a pretty intense sport, honestly. Like, and I didn't understood why when I had my period, or like why I couldn't play. It's a very masculine game. It's a very intense game. So at the end of the day, I looking back, it's like, yeah, of course, I wasn't feeling at my best when I was bleeding to play, but it's like, but I did it. And then obviously, like, my adrenals and my body and everything started to fail later on, because
Yeah.
I was working against my own body, and no one was like, yeah, just go home, take a chill,
Yeah.
you're bleeding, you're on your period, and you have to take it slow. It's not your best to be here today. Like, no one is telling you that. And also, like, on the working part, I used to work at a architectural firm, designing, and stuff like that, buildings, whatever. And that's a very, productive hustle environment where you have to be at the same peak all the time, or being able to develop and just like do. It's what is price. It's what people look up in you.
Yep.
And so I remember being with like the worst cramps ever and taking, pills for pain, but yet like taking coffee to be able to keep up because stuff needed to be done. And I think it's obviously like I had underneath stuff that were causing for those cramps to be there, but it's like, no, I don't need to perform the same all of my cycle. On the other hand, if if I give myself some empathy that, yeah, some days are gonna be better than others, and at some points I'm gonna be able to flow better with my cycle, but
Yep.
that understanding its level, because if something happens, as you said, you understand why, and okay, so this is what I do, I'm going to focus on this, my body is talking, it's not failing me, it's working, it's trying to give me signs, it's just trying to keep up, and it can't. So I think that's really important to mention, that when we are dealing with all of these things, maybe like talking a little bit more about that mindset emotional part,
Mm-hmm.
when we are dealing with either, PMS or fertility issues, or, acne because of hormonal issues, there's a lot of disconnection in general with our bodies. And also, I think that beyond like the disconnection of knowledge, we start to have a disconnection because of all the pain that it's related to that, and how we see that it's and how we relate it as our body is failing us,
Mm-hmm.
and the only answer is this pill and I'm helpless. Like, what are some probably mindset shifts, emotional stuff that was important for you, or that you have seen with your clients, that it's important to also have a chance when it comes to all of the other things that you do? How have you seen that part?
Yeah, yeah. So like I've said a couple of times, I just really stand by the fact that the first step forward is truly just trusting that it is possible to feel better, because I think people get stuck and lose hope because they're kind of we're taught that that is all that there is, and we do just need to get over it and take a pill, and that's the end of it. But the first shift that's really important is realizing that your symptoms are truly your body's alarm system. If we didn't have symptoms, we'd never know that something was wrong. And that's something that can be helpful for a lot of people, is shifting the perspective of, like you said, my body's failing me. I'm having all these symptoms, something's going on, and it feeling like a big disconnect. Actually realizing that your body is so intelligent that it can tell you when something's wrong. And imagine if it didn't. I mean, so many things would just go unnoticed, and so many problems would just get passed over and continue to grow and magnify if our bodies didn't have this little alarm system. And it's interesting because I've heard it said before that when you do take, say a pill or something that we look at as kind of a band-aid for problems, and there's nothing wrong with someone that's gone through that, because it's what is seen as the most common thing to do, is to go on birth control. And so if anyone's listening to this and they're on birth control, you didn't know, the doctors didn't know. It's not something that is very widely known, but what I'm here to do is give you the information so that you can make that conscious choice of whether or not that's something that feels helpful for you. But one thing that I will say about birth control or any kind of medication is that I've heard it said before that it's almost like taking the batteries out of the fire alarm. It's kind of just quieting the alarm system, but that doesn't mean that it puts out the fire. It's kind of just having a temporary, like, I don't want to hear that right now. I don't want my body to, give me those symptoms are annoying. They're a nuisance. Like, I don't want them anymore, and just make them go away, versus getting curious about why is it happening in the first place. And it is very unfortunate that, a lot of medical professionals, it's not really their fault. They truly weren't trained either to know how to take that approach. They were trained on what different medications do and, the best way to prescribe them. And, you have to find a really special doctor to have someone actually sit down with you and talk about your lifestyle and what could be changed. They're out there. They're just not as, common as I would hope for them to be. Maybe in the future it'll change, but so it's, the first step is just, becoming friends with your body and thanking your body for having this system that's alerting you that something's wrong and something could be better, and also giving yourself that hope of it can be different. My body's telling me that something's wrong because the balance could be there. I always say that our bodies, I believe, want to be, at that homeostasis level. It's kind of like everything is moving towards that point, but there's just obstacles that get in the way. There's things that come up that are either out of our control or within our control, that we have to figure out how to either remove those obstacles or just build some more support beams to help our body get through them. And that might be things like stress management and nutrition and movement and hydration and just fueling your body properly. And so that's the next piece too, is I like to say that it's not so much a mindset shift as it is kind of a first step, is to assess some of those areas, whatever is most realistic to you and what you feel like probably needs the most support, and do a little bit of an audit for yourself. Go through those areas of, how is my sleep? How are my stress levels? What am I doing to manage said stress levels? I always ask that question to clients too, is, on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you place your stress levels on a, regular basis? They give me the number. And then on the same scale of 1 to 10, where would you place your prioritization of de-stressing? And usually if the stress is like an 8 or a 9, the prioritization